Okay, so welcome to the Winners Win podcast. And today I've got someone extremely special, just from an operator point of view. He is one of the co-founders of Zuzi. He is a seasoned ICT expert. He wears an investor hat. He's multi-talented and a serious operator. He's done business across the continent and has been a key player in the ICT space for a number of years. And I'm very excited to have Tiniko Valoy in the building. How are you, my brother?
I'm well, thanks, Ted.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Winners Win podcast.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to come here. This is great. I think we last spoke and met a few months back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. Beautiful work you've done here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being on. But what's a typical week like for you?
Typically, I think my week pretty much starts very early in the morning. Every day I take my daughter to school. She wakes me up very early. And I pretty much kind of start the week planning out a lot of the operational and strategic activities that we go after.
Right.
We're running several businesses. One of our biggest businesses is a fiber to the home network.
Yes.
Here in South Africa. So that pretty much takes up the bulk of my time. It is a fiber network that covers over 10,000 customers in South Africa, growing pretty fast.
Oh, wow.
So that does require one to be very hands-on. So you got to be really moving between the operational side and the strategic side of things.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. And I think that in a few, I want to double click on what that means, one, for the country, what it means for you as an entrepreneur. But what is when I talk about all these things, so you have a face in e-commerce, you have a hat in investing, you have a hat in, the ICT space, telecommunications. Yeah. What's the origin story? How do you?
Yeah, so my story really sort of originates quite early on in high school, maybe somewhere in grade 8, grade 9, where I was lucky enough to have kind of left the village school. So I grew up in a village in Limpopo, from 2 parents, 4 siblings. And in that environment, I noticed that, like many villages in South Africa, you had very little access to great schools or resources or even careers and mentors. I was lucky enough to run into 1 or 2 teachers and a few books that really inspired me. I think I should also credit my parents. My dad used to bring a newspaper that became sort of a window to the outside world. And I then moved through a program that used to exist to take kids from underprivileged schools to more of what was seen as better schools, boarding schools. I got an opportunity to join one of these schools. I was identified, this was a science school, and they had a computer lab.
Okay.
So for the first time, I got exposure to what must have been perhaps 1 or 2 computers that existed in the entire district. And that's where my journey with ICT really started.
What grade is that in?
I must have been in grade 8, grade 9.
Okay.
So in fact, the computer lab, it doubled as what they used to call an audiovisual and computer lab.
Right.
At first, we just pretty much just used to go and watch TV. And then I was one of those kids that would climb up the roof when, the old analog antennas would be blown away by some wind, and then the signal wouldn't be so great. So,
yes.
So you'd rush up the roof and fix the signal, and go back and watch TV. And you must remember, Ted, early in the early 90s, mid 1990s, few places in rural areas had access to even a television. So it was quite a quite a privilege to
Sure.
have a television in boarding school,
Gotcha.
let alone have access to a computer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you find your way into Joburg, or how do you find the business muscle? Where does that come from?
Yeah. So interestingly, this program is quite interesting because it had a big impact in Guyana specifically.
Okay.
A lot of kids that kind of today may occupy very high positions in corporate and business came via this program. So it was a scientist that was brought from the UK by one of the homeland governments back then. This is under apartheid.
Of course,
These are early days before we had the new democracy. So a gentleman called Dr. Pell from the UK, I think he came from Cambridge, had been brought in to run this science project. And many kids that were selected from many rural schools came via this program. And it was sort of a bursary scheme. So it took you through boarding school until you completed your matric, and then exposed you to various universities. So I then find myself coming to Joburg for the first time for a bursary interview. I think this was with the then Anglo-American. He used to run a scholarship.
Okay.
That's how
Wow.
that's how my eyes got opened to a whole new world of opportunity.
Okay.
And I think I still hadn't really figured out whether I was going to be a computer engineer or a medical doctor or actually a mechanical engineer. All of this happens much later.
Gotcha.
Through that process.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what do you eventually end up studying in university, if at all?
So actually, so because my dad used to bring these newspapers every Friday, it was one of these financial newspapers.
Right.
And I used to look at the back of the newspaper and I would see these jobs and their salaries, what they paid.
Yes.
So
They still used to put salaries that.
yes, they would put a range, they would say that if you're a chartered accountant, you earn, between 100,000 to 150,000 rand a year. And I thought this was a lot of money. So I then decided I wanted to be a chartered accountant because I already saw the salary information.
The figure.
Yeah, I thought that figure was great. So that's where I started. I thought I was going to be a chartered accountant. My first year, I went to University of Natal, Durban. That's what I was studying. I only got to later switch to computer science in my second year.
Okay.
Yeah.
What brought about the desire to switch?
So I get to Natal, and when I'm at the University of Natal, this is 1996, 97.
Right.
This was really when email and Yahoo and all of these platforms were just starting, I had access to a computer lab this time, unlike my high school where we had to take turns using just two computers. Here we had a full laboratory with computers. And if I remember, that laboratory would open for nearly 24 hours.
Okay.
So I became one of those kids that was just spending so much time at the computer lab.
Gotcha.
There were some economics and accounting tutorials that you had to submit online. So, but I sort of just became a computer guy. I was the guy that all the other students would ask for help at the computer lab. When they come into the lab, they would find me there. When they leave, they would leave me there.
So you just naturally graduate, sort of, you floated towards
towards being the nerd, if I can.
And then, so what does the advent of sort of the telecom sector look like when you first started? Because I remember seeing that you were CEO of Fibre.
Yes. I got an opportunity much later. That's not really where my career started. So I left the University of Natal. I ended up at the University of Cape Town. I studied computer science and information systems. And I continued with my reputation of being the computer guy.
Right.
So many people who were at the University of Natal between 1997 to early 2000, you know, they will remember guys like me. We always sat at the back. We had this black screen. We were typing really fast. You know, these were the early days of chat.
For sure.
What you would consider today is kind of like your TikTok.
Right.
Or
DMs or your WhatsApps.
Yeah, your WhatsApps and all of that. But back in the days, it was really reserved for the clever computer guy that can really type very fast. So I basically go through 4 years of being at UCT. That transition was quite interesting. So I completely left accounting. I didn't pursue that any further. I told my sponsor, my scholarship, that I was changing careers.
Okay.
To their disappointment, because I looked like a promising accountant.
Yes.
And I then focus in computers. I begin to teach myself a lot of skills outside the formal curriculum of computer science. And I then became sort of a technology evangelist. I influenced many people in different faculties.
Yeah.
I mean, I managed to convince a number of guys who were doing engineering to switch into IT. So that's sort of how it all evolved. And I got my first job as a software engineer working in Cape Town.
Oh, I see.
2001, 2002. In that role, I still wasn't in telecommunication, but we were building the early versions of payment platforms.
Okay.
A very interesting company that we'll talk a little bit about.
Sure.
This was a South African company that built a product called Postilion. This is still used a lot in banks, telecommunication, and retail.
Postilion is the banking infrastructure.
It's a banking platform, yeah. A lot of banks in South Africa, in the US, and Southeast Asia, even in Europe, run a lot of their credit card processing on Postilion. Yeah, this was built by two co-founders, one from UCT and another one from Stellenbosch University. Yeah. So I was among the early software engineers that built the original platform out of a small office in Rondebosch.
So you still understand the banking stack?
Yes, because I pretty much worked for my first 5 years in as a software engineer. I worked on payment gateways. So I pretty much understand, ATM drivers, point of sale, integrating with core banking systems, internet banking, all of that infrastructure we built.
You built?
We built in, I think, between the year 2002 up to 2006. Yeah. And I got an opportunity then to travel quite a bit. We were implementing Postilion in a few markets. One of the markets was the UK, where we implemented Postilion for Vodafone to allow their customers to pay online, pay their bills online. We implemented it for General Electric. GE had a very big consumer finance division based out of London. They also adopted Postilion. And we also implemented it for a few European fuel retailers. In Europe, you typically will just drive to a fuel station and self-service yourself. So you just put your own petrol, swipe your debit or credit card. So that whole payment system we implemented in Postilion.
Man, that is so fascinating. Only because I'm exploring this fintech space now. My question to you is, based on where you started with Postilion and where it is now, how much has the banking stack evolved?
It has changed quite a bit. You could look at Postilion as the really early days of fintech.
Right.
although it was focused largely on traditional banks, it did demystify the banking, core banking system. So if you fast forward 20 years ago, you couldn't start any payment platform or do anything that looked like banking
For sure.
without actually having a banking license
For sure.
and really investing millions of dollars in building mainframe,
Yes.
core banking systems that cost in the tens of millions of dollars that you could only buy from a few vendors. When we came with Postilion was one of the first payment platform that didn't require mainframe, that could be run on a PC, x86 type platform on Windows operating system, and that a small size bank or startup could actually afford.
Okay.
So that gave us an edge, and we were pretty instrumental, for example, in the journey of the likes of InterSwitch. You'll know InterSwitch in Nigeria. They were one of our early customers.
Okay.
I think they exited to MasterCard with, in $1 billion transaction recently. They were one of our early customers in West Africa. We here locally in South Africa, we were used in virtually all of the mobile operators, all of the retailers, all of the banks used us in some form. In the US, our infrastructure was used by many regional banks, small regional banks. One of our big retailers was 7-Eleven, over 14,000 stores in the US, all ran on Postilion. But those were really early days. Postilion completely evolved. It subsequently got acquired by one of the big, banking software vendors.
That's why it got locked out.
So, but yeah, the story so the company was called Mosaic. The product was called Postilion. But that story is quite fascinating because the founders and many of the people who worked at Postilion went on to do great things.
Yes. Okay.
One of the early people that worked at Postilion, Johan Dreyer, is now based in California, Florida in the US, big investor in tech. Von Billion, one of the other founders, went on to help build what is now called Oracle Cloud.
Gotcha.
If you look at Amazon Web Services, one of the reasons, many people may not know this, so AWS has a very big, strong history with South Africa.
Yes.
Because actually the people who started with Amazon Web Services were largely South Africans who worked at Mosaic. So these were former colleagues that went on to help Amazon to basically take the process of building networking and hosting infrastructure and virtualize it. A lot of that skill came from our experience with Postilion, because we were working with ATMs and point of sale terminals, and these ATMs come in many forms and shape, and we had to learn to virtualize ATMs, because when you build a platform like that, you can't really afford to buy all the ATMs from everyone and keep them in your office to do all the tests. So you had to learn how to create a software stack that simulate these ATMs and actually virtualize them and test.
It's like running virtual machines.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd never actually touched a real ATM, but I'd worked with many different forms of ATMs.
And the systems around it.
Yeah, because we'd actually virtualized them.
Tell me, it's one of the reasons we don't have many new banking entrants because of a software limitation. So I guess what I'm asking is, was there an opportunity to do banking as a service? I know now it exists,
Yeah.
but maybe not. But is that one of the reasons?
Yeah, there's been two major reasons. One has always been licensing.
Okay.
So if you look at many jurisdictions, including South Africa, banking has always been kind of treated as
The Holy Grail.
Yeah, the Holy Grail. Only the very big businesses and very connected companies could lend these licenses, and they do come at a very high price in most cases.
For obvious reasons.
Because it's highly regulated.
Right.
I think that has continued to be a barrier.
Okay.
But yes, the other barrier was that the technology stack to run a core banking platform was always quite expensive until, of course, platforms like Postilion and now all the fintechs that we have in Africa started emerging. It is still, what you see now is the fintechs are really going into payment space because that's kind of a lower barrier to enter, and often not requiring a full banking license. But what you do realize is that as time goes on, you will have fintechs that will begin to take deposits, hold deposits, and have to deal with liquidity, and so forth.
That's why you need a BIN number.
Yeah, and that's where once you begin to take deposits and you begin to do SWIFT payments across the global payment infrastructure, you begin to integrate with MasterCard and do issuing and acquiring. Then you begin to move into that area where you need a platform like Postilion. Yeah.
One of the things that's bemoaned on this continent is just our inability to do payments across the continent swiftly and easily.
Yeah.
What's the solution there at all?
I think fintech will solve it.
Okay.
As well as how quickly we can get the continental free trade and some of the financial infrastructure that is being talked about resolved.
What is the actual problem?
I think the problem is largely that there hasn't been a settlement system that works across the continent.
Cool.
So if you look at South Africa, we have Switch and BankServe. These are settlement platforms. By the way, BankServe uses Postilion as well. And Switch is also is built on top of Postilion. Yes. So these systems ensure seamless settlements of transactions, whether on a batch basis. So it could be transactions are settled every day, 24 hours or 48 hours between the different banks. So if I come in and I bank with Bank A and I pay for my meal at a restaurant who is using Bank B, there has to be some form of settlements between the two banks, and it must be reconciled that I've utilized 100 Rand worth of goods, and that money needs to be paid over to the other bank. So that settlement infrastructure still needs to be built across the continent. Okay. It currently exists in certain jurisdictions, like South Africa has its own settlement system. Nigeria has a separate settlement system. The rest of the other smaller jurisdictions, we all often have to use MasterCard, MasterCard and Visa.
I see.
And that's why being a member of Visa and MasterCard is quite crucial, because that is the glue that sticks everything else in the absence of your own settlement system.
I see.
So Africa still needs to build that. I think it's not a question of technology. The technology is available to make it possible. Okay. Even Postilion could very well serve that purpose, and many other.
So i.e. I can set up an e-commerce store, sell to someone in Nairobi.
Yeah.
They pay me in shillings.
In
shillings, and I receive it in Rand.
You receive it in Rand, and you
without having to first convert to a dollar denomination and then come.
Yeah. But if you don't have that infrastructure, you then have to use Visa and MasterCard.
Which is why we're exposed to the
dollar fluctuations currency fluctuations with the US dollar and other currencies.
How far are we from getting that right?
I think we're probably maybe 4 to 5 years away.
Oh, really?
To getting there. The fintechs are really pushing the envelope. You're seeing fintechs really that are expanding into multiple countries, in Africa, and the pace is increasing. We are also beginning to see the central banks becoming more flexible, because the central bank, remember, is the regulator of most banking sectors across many countries. I think we're beginning to see in South Africa, the South African Reserve Bank starting to look at fintechs as a first-class citizen because of the whole payment ecosystem or the banking ecosystem. The advent of the new neobanks or digital banks is a sign of that change. In the last 10 years in South Africa, you have seen 4 or 5 new entrants going into banking, when we have lived for 30, 40 years with only 6 banks.
Correct.
So you are beginning to see changes. You look at Nigeria, it's really accelerating very quickly. Kenya, Ivory Coast, you are really beginning to see that change. But to be able to do true cross-country payment settlements, we are going to need the mechanisms, the regulatory mechanisms, to be adopted between at the continental level. And then only then will we see the platforms, the software start to be built to enable this. But the software already exists. It's not very complex to do this already.
The software already exists.
The software, through fintechs, through companies like Postilion, it already exists.
Okay.
Yeah. But of course, you cannot really negate Visa and MasterCard. Those have existed for a very long time. They obviously have the backing of the US, which still remains the largest, economy in the world.
Yes.
And of course, a big chunk of international settlements and trade still happens in dollars. So if I book a B&B in Brazil, that can only be settled pretty much via Visa or MasterCard.
Visa, MasterCard.
Yeah, because those are the only multilateral sort of, credit unions that both countries, banks in Africa and Brazil or China are members of.
Okay.
Yeah, and have that whole settlement infrastructure already set up.
You mentioned this sort of, and I'm seeing it as there's multiple tiers, traditional banking, neo-banking, and then digital banks. What's the difference between neo-banks and digital banks, if at all, or are they the same?
Yeah, they're kind of more or less the same thing. The digital banks, I think what you see with digital banks is that they don't want to have brick and mortar.
Yes.
So they move away from brick and mortar because they see it as a channel that is kind of past its sell-by date.
For sure. No one goes to the branch anymore.
No one goes to the branch anymore. So that takes out a big part of the cost of running a bank when you're a traditional bank. And it enhances the experience, and it allows for many other services that you're able to offer on a digital platform. And the scale of reach is also vast when you're running a digital bank. Yes, of course, it comes with challenges of, cybersecurity,
yes,
fraud, how you deal with fraud and so forth. How do you authenticate your customer? How do you secure the transactions? All of that. Now, neobanks are still digital banks, but kind of still have some physical presence in some form. And some will have the ability to take deposits, whereas you are seeing some digital banks just have a wallet. They're not really able to accept cash into the system because cash remains a very big part of our economy. Even South Africa, as industrialized as it is, we're still struggling with cash. I saw a report recently that still shows that cash is still king. It's still being used.
Right.
Many people
You disagree? You think we should migrate all the way into a digital cashless economy?
I think so. I think the technology has matured enough. The telecommunication infrastructure, especially the mobile networks, have such a deep reach that certain markets, certainly not all of Africa, but I think some markets are ready to go all digital, as Kenya has demonstrated. I mean, Kenya with Empessa is a very good case study for all of us to look at. It's a pity that the Empessa has not necessarily really been adopted
beyond
Kenya. East Africa, and most of it has largely been because of gatekeeping by the traditional banks.
So not the telcos.
In most cases, it's been the banks. It's been seen as a bigger threat by the bank. Remember, there's been a tough war between the telcos and the banks.
Yes, mobile money.
Yeah, the banks see mobile money as a threat to their core business, and they've lobbied very hard to keep these digital banks and mobile money and fintechs out of the pot, the honey pot. Because it is seen as being threatening to the traditional banks themselves. They have a good lobby for regulators, for the Reserve Bank, so they invest a lot lobbying the central banks to delay this transition.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I mean that's a good example is South Africa. It's I think a few Vodacom has tried to come with Empessa here. There's been various announcements, but it couldn't really work the same way that it worked in Kenya. It was a whittled down version of it, and it failed to take up to materialize purely because it was frustrated by the banks, you know.
Because Safaricom has become like a very formidable player.
It is, yeah. You can see it.
It operates like a bank.
It is a digital bank in every sense of the word.
And you can see Vodacom's numbers as well, just where the fintech business is taking it is probably going in the same direction.
Absolutely. And if you go into many of the CEO strategic meetings of telcos, you will notice that, you know, fintech, you know, mobile money is a very key driver of their growth strategy. And it has continued to be seen as a threat by the banks. And, you know, I'm not too sure where this will end. You see the banks now becoming mobile virtual network operators as well. So moving into the telco side while the MNOs are moving into the banking side.
What's the better move? I don't know if the banks, so we'll mention them, there's no conflict. I don't know if FNB Connect makes sense compared to a Vodacom or an MTN. Subscribe. Because the switching cost is just, or the switching is just too much of an inconvenience for you to.
Yeah. What you are seeing is the sort of everything becoming virtualized. So becoming more about the service as opposed to the underlying infrastructure. The infrastructure is still key, very important. But if you look, you can take a few examples. And perhaps the most famous of them is your Airbnbs, who can operate a very big business without owning any properties. You know, same thing with Uber. You know, running a big transportation company without actually any fleet. So I think the argument for banks is that you can offer a telecommunication service without actually owning the network itself, you know, as a service, and customers are only interested in the service that you offer them, how you innovate around it, how you bundle it, how you present it, the channels that you give to your customers. I think we'll continue to see more and more of that in various industries.
What is the bank relying on just in terms of infrastructure then, if they're now offering this without investing in the infrastructure?
Well, look, the they go and lease a slice of MTN or Vodacom's network, and they enter into a commercial, arrangement to do so. In much the same way that the telcos also still rely on the bank's underlying banking infrastructure to do a lot of
fintech stuff.
Yeah, so I think we are going to continue to see that grow. There has been. I mean, you look at some of your media players, your Netflix, who are running big media companies. They don't own any of the telecommunication infrastructure, and yet they're the biggest drivers of traffic on the network.
Video,
and and so forth. And it's a similar. You could almost paint it as a very similar scenario. There has been some murmurings in the industry that perhaps these companies, these fintechs or these over-the-top OTT platforms should begin to contribute towards the cost of the underlying infrastructure.
Yes.
But I think what you will see is the commercial arrangements will eventually drive what is possible. At the end of the day, it will be just business. Two entities will enter into some agreement, and each one will recognize the other one's strength.
Right. This sounds like you were meant to be in banking. So why did you leave?
Look, I'll be honest with you. I always looked at banking, and because of the time when I worked in that space, there were very little opportunities for an entrepreneur to really build anything. This were the fintech wasn't really a thing at that time,
Okay.
So I think I've always fancied myself as an entrepreneur, a disruptor, and maybe I was a bit too early there before fintech started.
Yes.
So I opted to go into telecommunication, and my journey. So 2007, when I left Postilion, I joined a company called iBest.
Yes. Okay.
And that takes us to the next
Chapter
of my career.
Before you move on, I wanna quickly ask you this: why have banks not adopted crypto? And maybe first, what is your view of crypto and how it fits into that banking ecosystem, fintech ecosystem?
Yeah.
And why are banks so openly resistant to it as opposed to adopt?
Yeah, I think crypto banks like to operate in a regulated environment.
Right.
Yeah. When banks look at a store of value, which currently is still denominated in the traditional asset classes, stocks, properties, cash. These assets are well understood in banking by regulators. There are very clear regulations for banks, in terms of liquidity and so forth, interest rates, how they are determined, inflation. So if you look at crypto is a disruptor in every sense of the word. It takes away the power from central banks to actually, in all fairness, to produce money, to dictate what kind of, what kind of liquidity you have in the system. And it takes away banks' powers to also remember the job of a bank is to really sell money.
Of course,
they get money from the central bank. They issue out loans at a specific interest rate. They have a margin that they charge, and that makes up the bulk of their income and profits. So I think the banks have largely followed the central banks to see where central banks are going to go with the adoption of crypto. And I think the more recent developments around crypto coming out of the Fed and many other major central banks have really started to open up that space.
Because Colin Powell said they can embrace it now.
Yeah, now that because the central banks have embraced it, you'll see banks are now, clamoring to get into crypto. But you see, it's very difficult to swim against the tide.
Say more? Yeah.
Crypto is a tide that I think is unstoppable.
Yes.
It was going to succeed. It was going to happen with or without the banks, So I think it was just a matter of timing as to when banks would start adopting it. And of course, certain banks were more bullish.
Yes.
I think they went in much quicker. Central banks, it was encouraging to see the South African Reserve Bank begin to look very closely into crypto and begin to start setting up, frameworks and regulation and licensing for crypto exchanges. So we will see it grow. Do I think that everything will become crypto overnight? I think it will still take some time. The adoption rate will take some time. I see crypto just joining as one of the major, store of value and currencies used to trade. It will continue to be adopted across the world as people look for a safe store of value, especially.
And let's say transactional.
Yeah, even in transacting, because transactions are going online and they're becoming digital, it will be easier for crypto to be used for transacting as well. What was going to be harder is, it would be impossible. I don't foresee someone waking up and saying, I'll issue a paper banknote in crypto. It will continue to be a digital currency that I think will do well in digital channels for transacting. And as more and more of trade moves online, it will become the dominant currency to transact with.
And it's so weird that banks didn't adopt stable coins, because stable coins give you, or at least eliminate, the volatility.
Yes.
As far as
why
didn't they start there?
Yeah, I think again it all goes back to where central banks are. The banks, because they are regulated, they are always looking for what are the regulatory impact of whatever they adopt. They are looking for stability and control. And remember, one of the major advantages of these coins is that they're not controlled by any specific jurisdiction or central banker, and banks don't necessarily like that, they like control.
100%. 100%. Okay, man, that's a fascinating chapter. Mavoni. You said there's 10,000 customers at this point. Do you define it as an ISP? What is the?
So we are both an ISP and so our industry, the telecom industry is quite has a lot of segmentation. We are a fiber network operator as well as an ISP. So you call it a vertically integrated operator. So if you look in our market, you will have ISPs that don't own any infrastructure. They just sort of ride on different networks. They have commercial agreements with the owners of infrastructure and offer their services. You then also have those that actually own their own infrastructure and offer services. And then you have the ones that just own the infrastructure and they don't offer any service. They don't compete with the ISPs. Their customers are the ISPs. So we are more of a combined player. We have our own network. We offer services on that network. We do also lease our network to other ISPs to offer services on it.
So if I'm thinking about practical examples, OpenServe, own infrastructure, no direct-to-consumer product.
Well, telecom is the ISP in a way. The two are, they are supposed to be operating independently and separate, but they are, of course, part of the telecom group.
Right.
Vuma maybe a better example in that they own the infrastructure,
Okay.
don't necessarily really offer any services on that infrastructure. Their customers are the ISPs, so they've got a whole group of ISPs
Oh, I see.
that sell services on the Vuma network.
And where do you land?
So we are more like a Hirotel or Metro Fibre who basically have their own network, but also sell services on that network.
Okay.
There's a pretty important reason why we went that route. For us, we are sort of a disruptor in the market.
Okay.
We're driving costs aggressively
Downward.
to expand access, and we operate in rural and township market, low income neighborhoods. Cost there is quite key.
Okay.
So we saw that if you have this segmented, if you have an FNO, and then you pass on that cost to an ISP who adds their own margins, you end up with a much higher price, So being integrated helps us to drive the cost down. And these markets are very price sensitive.
Yes.
We are operating somewhere where the household income is around 4,000 rand, 6,000 rand a month, So the kind of prices you
That's household income.
Household income.
Okay.
Yeah. So in that market, the cost of a fiber link is quite important. It will drive the adoption enormously.
What is the subscription typically priced at?
So we have a product that comes in at 199 rand per month, and this is really aimed at the very bottom of the chain.
BOP, right?
Yeah. We actually have we have people in townships that live in back rooms, for example. Those back rooms. We even have a cheaper product at 169 rand.
For a fiber.
A full fiber link,
How are you doing the sale if you're going to very sort of low income areas and then selling connectivity as a priority versus someone just buying data? Because it's not. If I'm in a low income area, I probably don't have the amenities that require that type of connectivity anyway.
Yeah.
Apart from maybe those DSTV dishes, which it's still sort of analog. It's not,
You're
not streaming Netflix.
Yeah. So you have seen a big change in low income neighborhoods, especially the urban ones. So if you go through the major cities of South Africa, the last 4 years or so, we've been in a race to deploy fiber.
Okay.
The adoption has really shot up. What you are seeing is many people moving even their DSTV dish and streaming online through Showmax and Netflix.
Okay.
So that transition is already happening in the township. Part of it is driven by the realization that when they buy a fiber line and add a Showmax subscription, it is much cheaper and they all can share the cost. They don't all have to spend all this money on buying individual data bundles in the household.
Okay.
So it is also a budget factor that's really driving the adoption of connectivity. There is a lot of education still that you do have to do.
To undertake.
To get customers to understand the advantage of having a fiber line versus having a SIM card and buying data bundles. But the value is very clear for those customers. They are able to see why this is such a good value proposition for them.
Okay. And that's the untapped market. That's where you're seeing your growth is going to come from.
Yeah. Our growth largely will come from underserved low-income markets, because we think that's a very big market. It addresses a huge market. And we have an ambition to be a Pan-African fiber operator. And we think much of Africa really is made up of that low segment, low-income segment.
Okay. I was pocket watching for a bit when you said 169.
Yeah.
Did times 10,000.
Yeah.
So the money is good, huh?
Yeah, it's a volume business. It is definitely a volume game. Of course, look, we do have more expensive packages for the slightly higher income or mid-income customers. So our average revenues comes in higher than the 169. I think we are somewhere in the order of about 300 to 350 as our average revenue per user. But we think the growth still largely primarily will come from the low income.
Okay. How are ISPs able to offer unlimited? Or is unlimited just a marketing?
It is possible. So remember there's two types of networks. The mobile network is a completely different kind of infrastructure. It operates on, radio frequency, which tends to be limited. It has to be licensed from the regulator. And that's what mobile networks like MTN, Vodacom, Telecom Mobile run on, Orange. All of those networks run on spectrum. That is limited.
Okay.
And that's why it's very difficult to offer an unlimited product on a mobile network. With a fixed network, it's very easy because you have fiber itself almost gives you an unlimited amount of bandwidth. Okay. It is limited only by the electronics that you put at the end of the fiber cable, but you can scale it linearly, Yes. Yeah, you have, I mean, I was in the US recently and I saw they had a cable that has 1,280 strands. Huh. One little strand can carry all of the traffic between South Africa and Europe. Oh, wow. So imagine if they have one that has 1,280 of these little fiber strands. They have virtually unlimited capacity. And that's the beauty of fiber, is that you have no limitation of
on
capacity.
How much capacity we can.
Yeah, you have no limitation.
So, so how far behind are we? Because sometimes when you're speaking to someone who's overseas, and they'll tell you, okay, I have, 100 gig per second or whatever.
Yeah, 1 gig or 500 megabit. We here in Africa, we have not yet seen large scale adoption of 1 gigabit fiber to the home services. They do exist. There's no technical limitation to rolling it out. It's more a question of, can people afford it? Okay. Also, when we look at the usage of internet across the continent, even in the in the US, 1 gig is really a theoretical product. Very few people will use a gig. And I must give an exception to people in media. Yes, if you have a media studio, you guys have the ability to make this podcast come out as a 500 gig file, and you want to send it between a studio here in Johannesburg and Paris. Yes, you would probably need a 1 gigabit link. But outside of that, if you look at a household who's streaming Showmax or Netflix and accessing content, they don't need that much bandwidth. They are okay with maybe 50 megabit. Okay. So I think you'll see in Africa we are very focused on rolling out 20 megabit or 30 megabit, because we think that's really what people need.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. How much of the next generation of infrastructure, and I want to talk to you a little bit about what Elon's platform means for
Starlink.
This market, right? Yeah. So one, I did want to ask you, and we'll come back to it, but how is data priced?
Yeah, so the
everyone asking for, like, if I'm buying 1 gig for 95 Rand on the banking app, how is that priced?
Yeah, look, on the mobile network, completely different from the fiber network. Okay. Because on the mobile network, you have a limitation. A single tower that you put up in the middle of a neighborhood costs a certain amount of millions to put up, to operate it. You have a certain bandwidth, what we call bandwidth. It's really, bandwidth is just, we're sharing a limited amount of time, on that tower. So if you have 1,000 people in this neighborhood who need to, connect to MTN, they are really all sharing a limited amount of time. So it's time sharing. That's how you get to utilize the network. But because it is
time sharing,
we'll call it time sharing. Effectively, what all your devices are doing is they are all within a space of a minute or a second, they are each getting a turn of 2 milliseconds or 3 milliseconds to send something, and then switch off temporarily for the next one to do that. So we call that time sharing.
Oh wow!
And that's how mobile networks work. So that has that time is limited on that tower, and that's why you can't just offer unlimited bandwidth. If you offer unlimited bandwidth, it's akin to me saying to you, I have unlimited parking here in Fourways Mall. You can bring all the cars, but the truth is the parking lot only takes 4,000 cars. The only way I can take 25,000 is we must share. We must do time sharing of the parking lot. So someone needs to come out for the next car to come in. And that's where the pricing of mobile data reaches a limit.
It's figured out.
Yeah. Whereas if you look at fiber, so fiber too has a fixed amount of bandwidth when it's deployed, but it just so happens to be a huge amount of bandwidth. Yeah, so huge that we could almost invite the whole job to come and park
parking lot.
at the parking lot.
Okay, so dropped calls was as a result of
congestion on a network with many devices trying to connect.
By the way, that is one of the smartest analogies I've heard about the network, like the parking lot.
I recently had the CEO of I think it was the CEO of Vodacom MTN trying to explain this whole data thing to parliamentarians, and I thought that was interesting as well.
Right.
Yeah, they gave a different analogy, but I thought of this parking lot analogy.
That's very powerful.
Yeah,
that's very powerful.
So if you come back to why are we all digging up your pavements and trying to put up this fiber, it's really because of this unlimited bandwidth that it offers. It happens to be the form of connectivity that has the least amount of loss. So when you communicate via wireless link, the quality can't be guaranteed. There's just so much environmental, interference, rain, obstacles along the signal path, trees, attenuation. They all they interfere with that signal. So it's not so easy to transmit a wireless signal between two locations wirelessly completely in a very reliable way. Whereas with fiber, I can literally have a very good signal between Cape Town and Johannesburg that is completely unobstructed, that arrives from one end to the other end with very little degradation. And that's why fiber remains quite important in telecommunication.
For my own lack of knowledge, can you explain undersea cables?
Yeah, so undersea cables are just fiber cables that buried under the sea to connect different continents, different countries across the continent. Why are we doing undersea or submarine cables, fiber optic cables, and not maybe doing satellites? A lot of people, for example, wonder why aren't we just using a wireless link, go to the satellite and drop it in New York from Johannesburg. So it turns out that to send a signal even to space, even to, let's say, Starlink satellite, and those are, by the way, more modern satellites that are deployed much closer to Earth.
Lower
orbit. The old satellites that we use for DSTV and other broadcasting and broadband services were much higher orbit. We call it geostationary orbit, over 36,000 kilometers above Earth. So if you were to send it on satellite, you have a delay. There's a substantial delay between two continents.
Okay.
And you have a limited amount of bandwidth. So it brings you back to wireless. So satellite is still wireless. It also is subject to limited bandwidth.
Okay. Parking lots.
The parking lots analogy. And it also do happen to have an actual delay. So to send a signal to 36,000 kilometers at the speed of light or sound still takes a certain amount of milliseconds, much higher than if we were to use an undersea fiber optic cable.
Okay.
And we just simply have so much bandwidth on the cable. So that's why these cables remain key. You have more than 500 or 800 of these cables connecting virtually all continents.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. Okay, so why is Starlink being blocked? If it's based on your explanation, right now it feels like everyone is having success on it because there isn't much adoption. But the moment everyone transitions to Starlink, then you have congestion problems, or is it not that?
Yeah. So in fact, Starlink's primary advantage, like any satellite, is it gives you global coverage.
Okay.
So while the fiber is great, gives me this big parking lot, I cannot bring it to everywhere else, Whereas Starlink is able to bring the smaller parking lot, but it can really give it to everywhere.
Parking lot is mobile.
Is mobile, can be delivered in the middle of Kruger National Park, can be delivered in a village, which is something that will take a very long time for fiber operators to do and very costly for fiber operators to achieve. In fact, the use case for Starlink versus fiber is that Starlink is largely targeted at rural and peri-urban inhabitants or areas, whereas fiber is largely suited to densely populated urban areas, cities and towns.
Yeah.
So the two really should coexist. They work together. They're not
mutually exclusive.
They're not mutually exclusive. Yeah.
Okay.
Even Starlink themselves, their primary focus is not really to offer the service in the cities. They've always targeted rural areas, outskirts. However, in Africa, they've found a different use case. Because Africa has such poor fiber infrastructure, the adoption of Starlink started happening in the cities. And that quickly congested the limited bandwidth they had. So I'm not sure you would have known last year they had to suspend adding new customers in Nairobi. I think they did the same in Lagos as well. That's because they ran out of bandwidth. Because it wasn't really meant for Lagos. It was meant for the outskirts.
Okay.
For the rural farmer, the lodge in the outskirts, the small town that's struggling,
How does he expand capacity? More satellites?
They have to add more satellites, but they do have a hard limitations as well as in terms of how many satellites they can add. They already have over 8,000 in orbit. So and these are not cheap, obviously, to launch as well.
Yes.
And they have a lifespan of 5 years. So every 5 years you have to replenish them, So it's like a car. You think of it, you are launching a car in space. It's busy flying around Earth. After 5 years, you have to destroy it and launch another one,
There's no maintenance. You have to destroy it.
You can't, currently we have no way of reaching a satellite because it's whittling around so fast. I mean, I think it probably circles in a day, maybe 10 or 15 times.
Oh, wow.
So you can imagine the space. That plane is very fast. If it was a plane, can you imagine a plane that lives here and goes all around Sydney, Japan, comes out Greenland, Canada, US, and is back in the East, in Nigeria, and back here in South Africa, and it does this 15 times a day.
That's immense.
So it's pretty fast, So yeah, those are the real sort of challenges or use cases for Starlink versus fiber.
Okay.
So we in our analysis is that the big cities and big urban settlements in Africa will require lots of fiber to connect. because we just have too many people in a square kilometer. There's no way fiber, I mean, Starlink will be able to service that many people reliably, while Starlink will serve the peri-urban and rural
quite comfortably.
Yeah.
Okay. Nuts and bolts about your business. How many people work for you?
So yeah, we run very lean operation. The fiber business is very interesting. It's both a tech company and a construction company. So the construction of the infrastructure, we typically outsource it to contractors. Those employ many more people than our actual company. They are responsible for digging and laying the physical infrastructure. We do both underground and aerial. So aerial is cables running on poles. Okay. Underground, buried underground. So our company itself employs about 25 people or so. Okay. When we add the full time, when we add the construction guys, those come add several hundreds of more people. Okay. That do the actual construction on a day-to-day basis. You do have, you have many operations in a business like that. Our job is largely to design the network, and obviously we finance the building of that network. We supervise it, quality assure that it's built to our standards, and then to operate that network. So in the operating of the network, you do have a team of, engineers, technicians that, monitor the network.
Yes.
It's a 24-hour network,
Okay.
The internet doesn't sleep. It operates 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days.
24/7.
Yeah.
I want to get your thoughts on what are you seeing as far as AI is concerned, both in your space and just your general view of it, as we begin to wrap up.
Yeah, AI, very interesting, Ted. It is one in a lifetime opportunity, I think, for African innovators, entrepreneurs, to really begin to reimagine how the world will look like. We take a very pragmatic approach to AI. We look for, I think it's something I would advise many entrepreneurs as well. Look for existing problems that AI can be a good, use case for, to solve, and we are seeing a rapid development of the large language models and their capabilities. There are many areas that, Africa can use AI for, that we can adopt, but it still needs a lot of supervision from humans. So it's very important to understand how you train these models. You don't just kind of adopt a model from somewhere.
Yes.
I think one of our biggest challenges in Africa is that we still haven't got the amount of data that is relevant to our conditions in Africa to train this model.
The LLMs.
The LLMs, yeah. So we have adopted AI largely in the customer care and billing sphere. We often have to deal with vast amounts of network data and billing information, and AI is quite useful there because we are able to feed it all of this data, and it's able to really give us some really interesting trends, and it's able to pinpoint, for example, a piece of the network that is problematic, and it can predict what is likely the cause of that problem, and what we can do to fix or avoid those issues. So we're seeing a big use case in improving network uptime using AI, improving the customer service. So a lot of customer calls. We were getting a lot of calls that are pretty basic, like someone unplugged the router, for example, it's off, or the cable that goes into that router is put in the wrong port. And we needed humans in the past to kind of repeat the same thing to 10,000 different people. With AI, you are able to train an agent and plug it onto your system, and it's able to actually pretty much solve 70% of the problem. So it takes off a lot of a lot of workload, and then you can only focus on the 20%, 30% of the issues. But training of the models is going to be what will be important.
Yeah.
I think in Africa we need to take an approach where we really look at areas where we can leapfrog, where AI can really give us the ability to leapfrog. Things that were not really possible, cost a lot of money. I think AI will allow us to really accomplish that.
What comes to mind? No pressure.
For me, and a number of areas that I think AI will really help in Africa is actually in healthcare, for example. Healthcare could be a great place to disrupt with AI in Africa. There's just a lot of illnesses that we don't have sufficient doctors or nurses to really diagnose and actually really help people to deal with. And I think AI, if we are able to feed a lot of the data, unfortunately, the health data that we have at the moment is sitting in many different clinics and hospitals and not accessible. So I think an opportunity for entrepreneurs in Africa is how to get this data and put it into a common platform and actually feed it to an AI model and begin to work out trends. That data is very useful because it could influence how pharmaceutical companies actually build their medications. We currently rely on medications that are often, made out of India or the UK and so forth. But I think with AI, we could begin to have some new medications that really deal with the peculiarities that we have in Africa. I think in fintech as well, big opportunity for AI. On the robotics,
on the payment level.
Yeah, even on payment and banking, if you take a lot of that information and feed it into AI, it's amazing what you could do with it. What comes out of it, we maybe be completely underestimating the power of that information fed into a powerful AI model.
Yeah.
For example, we don't really have a clear view of how much is spent buying per day, just spent buying a tomato paste.
Okay.
For example, if we actually had AI to really analyze that information, we could actually build entire industries.
Yeah.
Because if you match that with you match it with the new African intercontinental free trade zone. And with the payment platforms that are emerging with fintech, you could build entire industries.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
What happens when? Sorry, I know you were gonna go into robotics. So maybe this question tees into that. What happens when? So AI has the software infrastructure right now, but I'm sure you've heard of Stargate.
Sure.
And what OpenAI are building. What happens to connectivity when we at a particular layer now have connectivity requirements? And then the AI hardware has connectivity requirements. And here I'm talking to self-driving cars, I'm talking to the robots, the robotics, and all the infrastructure that now begins to operate on its own.
And that's why you need lots of fiber. So the fiber is key because it is the bridge that ties up the core of the network. Of course, the robots themselves have to be untethered. So if it's a self-driving car, that's a form of a robot. It obviously relies on a wireless link. But that wireless link to reach the AI data center, that link goes via, it's a piece of wireless connection, but immediately when it gets to a tower, it is on the fiber. Why fiber? Is because that's the fastest and low latency form of connectivity that we still have. So you need a lot of, we're gonna need to roll out 5G in many areas, and we'll need to densify the 5G network. Okay. And that dense network requires lots of fiber backhaul, because once the robots need to be connected to make a decision, it's very important that the connectivity cannot fail.
For sure.
Because you can imagine what a self-driving car that relies on a map
Absolutely.
that is a real-time map. If its connectivity fails, it could have very big implications.
It's mid-journey. Yes.
Yeah. So we are gonna, and that's why we need to invest in data centers. We need to densify the fiber network and densify the 5G network.
If it's not too personal, who's invested in your business? Are you open to investments? Because it looks like you've got you're very far from the ceiling in your business.
Yeah, look, at the moment, we've largely relied on bank finance, the typical sort of, small, medium enterprise bank facilities. I was fortunate enough to have a little bit of saving when I left iBest, and I was able.
That's a lot of saving, bro. That's not a little bit of saving.
Yeah, look, I have to qualify it. It was just enough to start a small network. We have largely self-funded it to keep growing it. You're gonna be speaking to Donny, my brother from Zulzi. He's also made some investment into Mavonia as well. So yeah, we are at the moment. Yes, we are in a funding phase. We will be raising a larger facility for 2026. I think we're going to start rolling out into West Africa. There's a few markets.
I was about to ask which markets, which other markets you're thinking about.
So for us, the big markets in Africa still remains Nigeria, DRC. Those are really big markets in terms of density and in terms of how the growth outlook for the next 10, 20 years look like. I've operated in Ghana, so I still have a very soft heart for Ghana. It's a market I understand very well when I worked for iBest. So we're still looking at Ghana. Kenya is also quite an interesting market. We are looking at some opportunities there.
Okay.
Yeah. So pretty much our outlook is really both East and West Africa. We think the key economies that are driving those regions is where we should start.
Okay. Yeah. Do you need regulatory approval to set up the infrastructure or set up the service?
Absolutely, yeah. You do, because we're largely an infrastructure business, you do need a telecommunication license in each one of the jurisdictions. So that's what we're busy with at the moment. That can take a year or so, but you need licensing
in every, even the rest of the continents.
Yeah, you're pretty much. That's what is stopping Starlink here in South Africa, is getting that license.
For sure.
So even Starlink has to get that same license that we would typically have to get. As you can see with Starlink, it has become quite political. But I think ours is not that political.
We have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, where your investor had for me, you sit as a partner on Chanzo Capital, which our mutual friend Eric sort of founded.
Yes.
What have been some of the learnings for you as an investor into startups, and what do you tell entrepreneurs today that want to start a ISP, for example?
Yeah.
What's the story?
Yeah. I've been fortunate enough to really kind of dabble as an entrepreneur myself. Have founded several businesses, been part of very early businesses that have grown into formidable businesses, companies. I've also seen some failures as well. I didn't dwell a lot on iBest, but iBest really was a great success that eventually collapsed in Ghana. And it had a lot of promise. In South Africa, it got acquired by Rain, so it is what you now call Rain. So had a new lease on life, and those lessons.
I didn't know that.
Yes, what you call Rain is iBest.
How did they go out of business? Is that too long a story?
Yeah, sometimes early success can be detrimental. Founders often making some mistakes as the business grow. And I think the lesson there with iBest was sometimes and this is a lesson I would give to many startup entrepreneurs. Sometimes the founder may not necessarily be the right person when the business becomes bigger.
Yes.
Because
when it's time to scale.
Yeah, when it becomes bigger, there's just a lot of risk to mitigate. There's a lot of regulatory issues, compliance, very mundane, boring tasks that maybe as an entrepreneur may not be very fascinating to you, may not even motivate you. And that's why you need to bring in more professional managers, who have worked for some of the boring companies like banks or insurance companies, But these are skilled managers that understand risk and processes and compliance and so forth. I think one of the issues that IBES ran into, in South Africa, definitely some compliance and regulatory issues around paying for spectrum licenses that were outstanding. There was also, I think the company failed to transition, to move, because these technologies keep changing. So you also need to be able to transition. We had an opportunity to transition from the IBES technology, which had almost kind of gone past its sell-by date.
Right.
And we should have moved into 5G much early. It was a little too late when we attempted to move into 5G. And the business finances and balance sheet was no longer in very good shape to be able to raise the funding to rebuild the network. And that business was subsequently sold to the Rain group under Paul Harris, Michael Jordan, and now Patrice Mutse as investors, the art group, So that's a little bit of the story around IBES. The Africa operations largely also failed because we had a great start. The business really worked very well. From zero in Ghana, I ran the business up to 10,000 customers. In fact, we were, at some point, we were the largest ISP in Ghana, And much of what I understand about telecommunication is actually from an operator point of view. I landed in Ghana, So it also raised a lot of funding, over $33 million, tried to grow very quickly into multiple markets. So those lessons are key. As an investor now, don't grow too quickly, and take each step at a time, one step at a time, learn the lessons, assess the risks. And when you make a mistake, you must not be shy to make a very quick U-turn.
To correct it.
Yeah. So we found a lot of entrepreneurs, and this is something I impart to as an investor now with Chanzo Capital to our startup founders, is when you have made a mistake, you must be the first one to wake up in the morning and say, guys, we were going left, that's wrong. We're going right, or we're going back, And you need to cut costs as well. Sometimes when the business is growing so quick, we're very fast to hire too many people.
Yes.
And then suddenly they
solve everything with money.
Yeah, I think that the money is often not really the solution to many problems.
Yes.
In fact, what is the solution is think hard about the problem and hunker down and do the work. And you'll soon realize that actually money is the last thing you actually need to solve that particular problem. While money is important, it's not always the only solution for all the problems. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we're going to do another conversation. I think you've got a wealth of knowledge. You've forgotten what most people know, and I think that the economy is evolving. Old systems are going to fall away, and I'm very keen for us to talk in future about where you're seeing, for instance, the impact of the gig economy.
Yeah.
Right, because you guys are one of the centerfolds of it from a Zulzi point of view. 5 years ago, you didn't see as many motorbikes as you're seeing now.
Yeah.
But this has become a real way for people to
make a living.
To make a living.
Yeah.
What do you think is your outlook on, that ecosystem.
Yeah, look, it continues to evolve really rapidly, very fast, and I think everything is digitizing. Services are digitizing. Infrastructure is being digitized. Even hard infrastructure, there's a whole layer of digital services on top of it, that I think allows us flexibility to really go far. I think the future is great for Africa, but the entrepreneurs and also the regulators and our government needs to have a bigger vision,
Right.
and be a lot more bolder.
Right.
I think we're living at a time when it's almost when electricity was invented, and you could actually build a factory and run an electric motor to do many things that you would have needed a 10,000 strong man to pull. You now could buy a machine that can pull this. So it means we can fix many of Africa's problems quite quickly and rapidly, from agriculture to healthcare, to housing. It just requires us to be bold, but at the same time be very decisive, and be careful as to which solutions we implement now, what solves our problems, and we need to always focus on the problem at hand.
Right.
But I think the future is exciting.
Mm-hmm.
It is a great time for entrepreneurs to be alive.
Yeah.
We are also getting a lot of investors that are really interested in funding, ventures, new ventures, tech ventures.
Yes.
We are seeing a lot of success, and you are seeing big economies like the DRC, Nigeria. They're beginning to rise. So I think it is an exciting time to be alive. So I definitely look forward for us.
I look forward to seeing you launch in the DRC. That's very close to my heart. But,
it's a massive market. I mean, you look at the whole Lobito corridor.
Yes.
What is happening? It's very transformational. And the new, peace deal. Everyone is hoping it holds, because it has a very huge impact on that region. If you get the DRC to rise, I mean, you have literally a few countries in Africa are important for the future of the continent.
Absolutely.
And you cannot mention these countries without Nigeria, DRC, South Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya. These are the really, elephants.
The powerhouses.
The powerhouses. If these countries rise, they'll rise with the continent.
Absolutely.
They will change the fortunes of the continent.
My brother, I have really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for making the time. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching the Winners Win podcast. Like, subscribe, comment, share your thoughts with what Tiniko has shared. Again, just a wealth of knowledge across so many sectors, and this is what winners do. They win. All right, we out.